Good afternoon, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Days after political turmoil, French President Macron reappoints Sébastien Lecornu as Prime Minister. Lecornu faces Monday deadline to deliver next year's budget before Parliament. Displaced Gazans return to shattered homes as ceasefire deal takes effect. Trump escalates trade war with China, announces additional 100% on Chinese goods from November 1st, also threatens to cancel summit talks with Xi Jinping. In a push to agriculture and allied sectors, Prime Minister Modi lays foundation of various schemes and projects in New Delhi. French President Emmanuel Macron on Friday reappointed Sébastien Lecornu as Prime Minister of France just 4 days after his resignation. Macron made the announcement late on Friday, hours after meeting all the main parties together at the Élysée Palace, except the leaders of the far right and far left. Lecornu on X said after Élysée announcement that he had accepted the mission out of duty. He further added that anyone joining his new cabinet must give up plans to run in the 2027 presidential race, promising instead renewal and diversity of skills. As Prime Minister Lecornu has to face an immediate test to present a draft budget bill for 2026, first to Cabinet and then on the same day to the Parliament, missing the deadline would leave lawmakers without the 70 days the Constitution grants to debate past the budget before year-end. The Constitutional Court also requires 8 days to review the legislation. If Lecornu is brought down by a no-confidence vote, as some opponents are already promising, the Parliament would need to pass emergency stopgap legislation to authorize spending, taxation and borrowing from January 1st until a full budget is adopted. France has resorted to such an emergency measures last December after the then Prime Minister Michel Barnier's government was ousted, invalidating his proposed 2025 budget. France has been mired in political stalemate since the president dissolved parliament in June of 2024, triggering snap elections that produced a hung National Assembly and left Macron's centrist bloc without a majority. In other news, US President Donald Trump announced an additional 100% tariff on China on Friday, reigniting his trade war with Beijing in a row over export curbs on rare earth minerals. In a post on social media, Trump said the extra levies plus US export controls on any and all critical software would come into effect from November 1st. Trump accused Beijing of taking an extraordinarily aggressive position on trade and warned that the United States will respond in kind. He also said export controls will be placed on all critical software starting the same day. Trump also threatened to pull out of a meeting with China's President Xi Jinping. He later said he had not cancelled it, but he did not know, according to him, that we're going to have it. Rare earth elements are critical to manufacturing everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to military hardware and renewable energy technology. China dominates global production and processing of these materials. Earlier, China hit US-owned vessels docking in the country with tit-for-tat port fees in response to the American government's planned port fees on Chinese ships. Vessels owned or operated by American companies or individuals and ships built in the US or flying the American flag would be subject to $56 per net ton fee per voyage if they dock in China. The new port fee would take effect on October 14th, the same day when the United States is due to start imposing port fees on Chinese vessels. Washington and Beijing engaged in tit-for-tat tariffs war earlier this year that threatened to effectively halt trade between the world's two largest economies. Both sides eventually agreed to de-escalate tensions, but the truce has been shaky. United States on Friday threatened to impose sanctions and take other punitive actions on countries backing the International Maritime Organization's Net Zero Framework proposal. The development comes as members of the London-based International Maritime Organization are set to vote next week on the adoption of the Net Zero Framework Agreement aimed at reducing global carbon emissions from the shipping sector. The Trump administration has expressed a strong stance against the framework, asserting that it would lead to increased costs impacting American citizens, energy providers, shipping companies and tourists. In a statement released on Friday, the administration made its position clear, aiming to protect U.S. economic interests against any measures perceived as economically disadvantageous. U.S. President Trump on Friday outlined his upcoming visits to Israel and Egypt following Israeli government's approval of Phase 1 of the Gaza peace plan, describing the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas as a great deal for the world. Trump said the deal would secure the release of hostages and the return of approximately 28 bodies.
As you know, on Monday the hostages come back. They're getting them now. I mean, they're getting them now. They're in some pretty rough places under earth. They're in some pretty rough places where only a few people know where they are in some cases. So they're getting them, and they're also getting the bodies, approximately 28 bodies. And some of those bodies are being unearthed right now as we speak. I mean, they're working on it right now as we speak. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. I'll be going to Israel. I'll be speaking at the Knesset, I think, early on, and then I'm also going to Egypt.
Displaced Gazans continued their journey to return to the ruins of their abandoned homes in northern region from early morning of Saturday, a day after ceasefire took effect. Thousands of Gazans started to trek north along the coastal road overlooking sandy beaches towards Gaza City from Friday, after ceasefire and Israeli troops began pulling back under the first phase of an agreement to end the conflict. Gaza Civil Defense Agency confirmed that Israeli troops and armored vehicles were pulling back from forward positions in both Gaza City and Khan Yunis. Meanwhile, the EU mission at Rafah border between Gaza and Egypt will be reopening a pedestrian crossing on October 14th. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced that Qatar will be allowed to build an Air Force facility at Mountain Home Air Base in Idaho that will house F-15 fighter jets and pilots. The announcement comes soon after President Donald Trump signed an executive order vowing to defend Gulf Arab state against attacks following Israeli airstrikes targeting Hamas leaders in the Qatari capital Doha in the past weeks. Idaho Beast currently also hosts a fighter jet squadron from Singapore. According to its website, the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar is Washington's largest military facility in the Middle East. Later, Hegseth clarified that Qatar will not have their own base in the United States, but US will control the existing base. The White House said on Friday it had begun mass layoffs of federal workers as federal shutdown entered into the 11th day on Saturday. With the crisis set to go into the third week and no off-ramp in sight, Trump's budget chief Russ Vought announced on social media that the administration was following through on the threats to fire some 750,000 public servants placed on enforced leave. Job cuts were underway at the Treasury Department, the U.S. Health Agency, Internal Revenue Service and Departments of Education, Commerce and Homeland Security's Cybersecurity Division. However, the total extent of the layoffs was not immediately clear. Roughly around 300,000 federal civilian workers had already been set to leave their jobs this year due to a downsizing campaign initiated earlier this year by Trump. Trump on Friday blamed the Democrats for his decision to lay off thousands of workers across the U.S. government as he followed through on its threat to cut the federal workforce during government shutdown. Trump has repeatedly threatened to fire federal workers during the shutdown standoff. Trump also ordered the freezing of at least $28 billion in infrastructure funds for New York, California and Illinois, all homes to a sizable population of Democrat voters. 19 people were missing, possibly dead, after a devastating explosion at a military explosives plant in Tennessee. The explosion at Accurate Energetic Systems occurred at 12:45 GMT. Humphreys County Sheriff Chris Davis said there were multiple fatalities, but it was still too early to know precisely how many people may have perished, saying it was still possible that there were some survivors. Investigators from the FBI and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives were at the scene working to determine the cause of the explosion. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize on Friday to the people of Venezuela and the US President Donald Trump. Machado, in a social media post, stated that she dedicated the prize to the suffering people of Venezuela and to President Trump for his decisive support for Venezuela's pro-democracy movement. Machado has backed Trump's ongoing campaign of military pressure on Maduro, including a major US naval deployment near Venezuela as a necessary measure towards a democratic transition in Venezuela. Machado was the opposition's presidential candidate for Venezuela's 2024 elections, but Maduro's government blocked her candidacy. Venezuelans living in Buenos Aires gathered outside the closed Venezuelan embassy to celebrate the recognition of Maria Corina Machado's decades-long fight for democracy, as President Javier Milei congratulated the laureate on social media platform X, while Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum opted for a neutral response, citing a constitutional mandate. Some global weather updates now. Heavy rains in Mexico has left nearly 30 people dead, many missing, as downpours triggered several landslides, power cut-offs and rivers to burst their banks. Civil protection authorities in Hidalgo confirmed the destruction of at least 1,000 homes and hundreds of schools. Mexico's civil defense authorities reported intense rains in 31 of 32 states, with worst affected areas being Veracruz in the east. The Ministry of Defense said it had deployed over 5,400 personnel to help monitor, evacuate and clean up affected areas. Meanwhile, storms Raymond and Priscilla have been dumping rains on the Baja California Peninsula and the country's western Pacific seaboard. Strong winds and fog were reported on the Saba Island, a Dutch territory, as Tropical Storm Jerry swept through the Caribbean on Friday. Local authorities reported that a motorist was found dead after being swept away by floodwaters. The storm caused disruption on the roads and left hundreds of customers without power. Schools were shut, public transport and boat connections between islands cancelled. The storm prompted authorities to issue a red alert for Guadeloupe, but warnings have now been lowered to heavy rains and thunderstorms. Meanwhile, Martinique to the south remains on orange alert. The storm also skirted the coast of nearby islands of Saint Barthélemy and Saint Martin. Storm Jerry is now moving towards North Atlantic Ocean. In Philippines, dazed survivors of pair of major earthquakes in southern region awoke on Saturday to scenes of devastation after hundreds of aftershocks rocked the region overnight. Many coastal residents of Mindanao Island had slept outdoors, fearful of being crushed to death by aftershocks of the 7.4 and 6.7 magnitude earthquakes that struck off the coast within hours of each other on Friday. Philippine authorities said at least 8 people were killed, but they were still assessing the extent of the damage. And with the rare Nelu blossoms painting Sri Lanka's Houghton Plains in vibrant shades after 12 long years, nature once again reminds us of its timeless magic. Visitors are urged to tread lightly and respectfully in this sacred ecosystem. The next bloom may be more than a decade away, but the memories made today, they say, can last a lifetime. Still to come on this edition of DT India Live. India to showcase Buddha sacred relics in Russia's Kalmyka. In cricket, India in commanding position against West Indies in the second test. Today is International Day of the Girl Child, a global observance dedicated to championing empowerment of girls everywhere.
So now you can't talk about British imperialism in India without talking about the East India Company.
Britain is just dotted with the visible representations of loot from India. The one thing you folks have never done is just say sorry.
Are you ready to roll?
I am ready to roll.
You're watching DT India Live. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. In a landmark push to India's agriculture and allied sectors, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana in New Delhi today. It reaffirms the government's commitment to agricultural growth, rural development and farmer welfare. Prime Minister Modi interacted with farmers engaged with pulses cultivation who have directly benefited from various government schemes. He participated in a special agriculture program at the Indian Agricultural Research Institute. The schemes launched today aim to enhance agricultural productivity, promote crop diversification, boost post-harvest storage infrastructure, and improve access to credit in 100 selected districts. Prime Minister also distributed certificates to farmers, technicians, and other stakeholders. The mission for Atmanirbharta or self-reliance in Pulses initiative seeks to increase Pulses productivity, expand cultivation areas, strengthen the value chain, and minimize post-harvest losses. India is set to host the United Nations Troop Contributing Countries Chiefs Conclave in New Delhi from October 14 to 16th. Military leaders from over 30 nations will come together to discuss peacekeeping challenges and strategies. The conclave will focus on evolving peacekeeping operations, sharing best practices and enhancing future readiness. The Chief of Staff of Algerian Land Forces recently highlighted the importance of global cooperation in maintaining peace. The event underscores India's commitment to international peacekeeping efforts. A high-level delegation of 11 senior Indian monks transported sacred relics of Lord Buddha to Russia's Kalmyka Republic for an exposition. The Holy Relics Exposition, first in the Russian Republic, is organized by India's Ministry of Culture in collaboration with International Buddhist Confederation, the National Museum and Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts. The sacred relics preserved in the National Museum will be enshrined in the main Buddhist monastery in Elista, known as the Giden Shadkoling Monastery, or the Golden Abode of Shakyamuni Buddha. The Indian monks will offer blessings to local devotees and conduct religious services for the region's predominantly Buddhist population from October 11th to 18th. It was the 19th Kushak Bakula Rinpoche, the revered Buddhist monk and diplomat from Ladakh, who played a pivotal role in reviving Buddhism in Mongolia and subsequently was also instrumental in reintroducing interest in Buddha Dharma in the three regions of Russia, namely Buryatia, Kalmykia and Tuva. Only two leaders achieved saintly status during their lifetime. One was Mahatma Gandhi, the other perhaps Jayaprakash Narayan. As a result, when JP returned to active politics in 1974 with the cry, "Leave the throne, people are coming," the entire nation followed him like a saint. Let's trace the journey of Lok Naik in this report.
With his thoughts, philosophy, lofty ideals and unique personality, Lok Naik Jayaprakash Narayan not only shaped the nation's course but also awakened the imagination of the common man. The Total Revolution, also known as the JP movement, was the first major mass movement in independent India, shaking Indira Gandhi's government, giving birth to a new generation of leaders, and striving to bring honesty to political life. Jayaprakash Narayan was born on 11th of October 1902 in Sitabdiara village in Saran district, Bihar. JP Narayan left his village at the age of 9 to study at Collegiate School in Patna. In 1920, at the age of 18, he married Prabhavati Devi. He went to the United States in 1922 for higher education. To pay for his studies in America, he worked in farms, companies, and hotels. He earned his BA and MA degrees from the United States. After returning from America, Jayaprakash Narayan joined the Indian National Congress in 1929. He was imprisoned in 1932 for his active participation in the civil disobedience movement against British rule. During his imprisonment in Nashik jail in 1932, he came into contact with several socialist leaders. In December 1939, as General Secretary of the Congress Socialist Party, Jayaprakash called on the people to take advantage of World War II to stop British exploitation in India and overthrow the British government. For this reason, the British imprisoned him again for 9 months. When the Quit India movement began in 1942, JP Narayan led movement along with Ram Manohar Lohia and Aruna Asif Ali. JP Narayan was arrested and imprisoned in Hazaribagh Central Jail. He escaped from prison with 6 of his comrades. JP Narayan actively worked underground for the independence movement. He formed Azad Dasta in Nepal to fight the atrocities of the British rule. In the early 70s, when the common people of the country were suffering from unemployment, inflation, and a corrupt government system, a different side of JP was revealed. In 1974, students in Gujarat requested Jayaprakash Narayan to lead Navnirman movement. In June of that year, he called for a peaceful total revolution at a public meeting. For his significant role in total revolution, he earned the title of Lok Nayak. Total revolution led to emergency and formation of first non-Congress government. While imprisoned during the emergency, his health deteriorated significantly, leading to his release on 12th of November 1976. Jayaprakash Narayan died in Patna on October 1979 due to kidney failure. In 1965, he was awarded the Max Essay Award for Public Service. The Vajpayee government posthumously awarded him the country's highest civilian honor, the Bharat Ratna, in 1999. Bureau Report, DD India.
October 11th is observed every year as International Day of the Girl Child, as declared by the UNICEF, a global occasion to honor girls around the world, amplify their voices and promote their leadership. More in this report. October 11th is celebrated annually as the International Day of the Girl Child to recognize girls and elevate their voices worldwide. The theme this year is The Girl I Am, The Change I Lead, Girls on the Front Lines of Crisis, which highlights girls' leadership in crisis situations. According to UNICEF, 122 million girls worldwide are out of school, including 34 million girls at the primary level and 87 million at the secondary. At the same time, the gender gap in global labor force participation still persists. Women's participation in the labor force is significantly lower than men, with the gap being 26% in South Asia, 20% in West Asia and North Africa, 53% in Latin America, and 59% in East Asia. With 2025 marking 3 decades since the Beijing Declaration, it is time for the world to assess whether the goals of gender equality set back then have genuinely been met. At the same time, girls around the world are stepping up to face today's biggest challenges. They are raising their voices for climate justice and demanding an end to violence globally. Today, women are confident problem solvers, striving to become self-reliant in every field. India has always prioritized welfare of girls. Schemes such as Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao and Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana have been launched nationwide. These initiatives not only aim to empower Indian women, but also ensure equal rights for them. Consequently, India has been steadily advancing its position in the Global Gender Gap Report year after year. Meanwhile, UNICEF is working with girl-led groups and networks at the global level to help create a world where girls' voices are not only heard in policy-making, programs and humanitarian response, but are also acted upon. Bureau Report, DD India. In sports, in cricket, Indian batters continue to pile runs against modest West Indies attack on the second day of the second test in Delhi. India's first session saw a crucial wicket fall as the hosts lost their fourth wicket with the dismissal of Nitish Kumar Reddy for 43. Despite the setback, India remained firmly in control, having crossed the 400-run mark. Skipper Shubman Gill is steadily closing in on his century. Earlier, opener Yashasvi Jaiswal was run out after adding just a couple of runs to his overnight score of 173. India lead the two-match series 1-0 and are looking for a clean sweep. That's all for this edition of DD India Live. We'll be back with more news as it breaks on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.